Hello, everybody. LC Holt here, and this is our last show of 2019. Can you believe it? The next time you see us, it'll be 2020. So,
Barbara Walters.
That's right. And so here we go. We're going to talk today about a show that was extremely popular when you and I were in college. A show called Ghost Hunters. We're not only going to talk about Ghost Hunters, though. We're going to talk about ghost hunting in general. Kind of focus around that show because that show was the show that kind of started the whole thing.
And we can tie it into the holidays a little bit,
How's
right?
that?
Could they have ghost hunted the ghosts of Christmas past, present, and future?
You could have, yeah.
Bad joke.
But I'll tell you this much: this whole Ghost Hunters TV show came about because of two guys.
Yep.
And that was Grant Wilson and Jason Laws. And Jason started this thing really early on. You know, he was the first one. 1990, he started the group. And then Grant came along in 95 and joined up with Jason. And then they got together and created this thing called the Atlantic Paranormal Society, otherwise known as TAPS, right? It was based out of Warwick, Rhode Island. And these two were Roto-Rooter plumbers, which they made a lot of that on the show.
Yes, the first couple of seasons.
That's right.
And then they were like, we don't need the plumbing gig anymore.
They would always start off these shows and they'd be off at somebody's house fixing their shitter. And they would have these.
They're doing an exorcism on the shitter.
It's like the scene in Scary Movie 2, you know, where the guy's on the exorcist is on the toilet.
Yeah.
It's like, God save me from this beast. And you cut and he's sitting on the toilet.
Okay.
But it's Grant, and then Grant and Jason are in the room with him.
Yeah.
And Grant's like, okay, what the fadge? Maybe we can save.
Was it fetch?
I thought it was fadge.
I thought it was fetch. What the fetch?
What the fetch? Which, if something jumped at me from the darkened shadows, is the first thing I would say.
Absolutely. I see, yeah.
And Jason would be standing over there being very serious, like, well, I'm not sure, Mr. Exorcist, that beast coming out of you is truly evil. That's my Jason impersonation, which is not very good, actually. No, it doesn't sound like him at all. Now, in 2003, these two fellows were approached by Pilgrim Films, and they struck up a deal with the Sci-Fi Channel.
Old Siffy at that point is what it looked like it was spelled.
Yeah,
remember, it was SCI-FI, and then it went to
SYFY,
which made no sense.
Makes no sense whatsoever.
That's about the time I was like,
Do you remember when we were young and the Sci-Fi Channel first came on?
And they showed actual science fiction?
Yeah, but remember the original trailers for the Sci-Fi Channel is coming would be like
Star Wars.
It was like a street, and then you had like Saturn with the rings coming up over the cities and stuff.
Yeah.
Well, many years after that, because in 2003, the Sci-Fi Channel had been around for a while. Much Mystery Science Theater 3000 had been played by this point. Because they used to do that. I used to love watching that on there.
Yeah.
But then Ghost Hunters came around. With Pilgrim Films, they did 10 episodes of that first season. This whole thing originally started out in Jason's basement, TAPS I'm talking about. And then when they got the show, it kind of moved to the trailer.
They got a trailer.
There was a trailer in Jason's backyard. And then after that, they moved to that storefront.
That's right.
In Warwick.
Yes. They were on a main street.
I know. Can you imagine having a storefront? That's almost like Ghostbusters.
Yeah.
You have your own storefront because like people can walk in and be like, excuse me, sir, I have a ghost in my house. Can you help me?
Before it was in the trailer.
Yeah, nobody wants to go to Jason's house. You might get shot. Jason's a serious dude. Now, the original show was a docu-soap. Is how it was the format. A docu-soap is what you would call, I guess, a show like Pawn Stars.
And the drama had to do with Brian mostly, right?
A lot of Brian, because the original group was Jason, Grant, Donna LaCroix, Brian, and Steve Gonzalez.
Yeah.
And they were kind of the original group. And I think there may have been, was that everybody?
I think wasn't there another person that would kind of come and go, but
they had some kind of coming and going, but I remember that core group.
Yeah.
And Brian was a lot of the docudrama stuff, because the idea of a docudrama format is you have like the investigations And then you're also seeing
Their
behind the
personal
scenes,
drama.
yes, conflicts that are going on
It's like
with
the
the
real
ghost
world
hunters.
meets ghosts.
Exactly. And Brian was the basis of all this because basically they treated Brian like he was the ultimate screw up. And,
Yeah.
and Brian was one of those guys whose mouth never seemed to close.
Yeah.
And he was just like,
Yeah.
just taking it all in.
And he had left the group, or did they kick him out and then he came back, wanted to come back, and they were trying to decide, should we let him back in? Let's put him on a trial basis.
Remember, he left because of a girl.
That's right.
And I guess they broke up. And then he decided he wanted to come back. And that's when they brought him on for the trial basis. The basic format of the Ghost Hunters show originally was you would always start off with, usually with the Roto-Rooters in the early seasons, there'd be really a staged moment where they're in somebody's basement and it's really well lit and the cameras just happen to have several angles.
That's right.
And they're just standing there fixing a toilet and saying,
they miraculously fix it.
That's right. And they say, oh, by the way, while we're fixing this toilet, did you hear about that case Donna is working on? She got for us? And then it would lead into the episode. And the episode proper usually began with them driving to someone's house or business. Yeah, right. And then they would go in and they would talk to the person. You'd get the background of the haunting, the background of the location. Uncle John fell off the roof of his house and now he's haunting us, just as an example. I don't think that was ever actually on the show. And then what they would do is you would see them setting up for the investigation, which always took place at night.
Yep.
They would put these digital cameras around.
What if the place was really haunted? It's just the ghost is like, I don't like to come out at night. That's when I like to rest.
I'm a daytime ghost.
Sheesh.
The ghost hunter is shit out of luck.
Why are you stereotyping me? Why are you putting me in that box where I only have to come out at night?
Well, as soon as they would get this thing set up, they would turn out all the lights because it's creepier in night vision mode with the cameras.
Yeah.
And then they would walk around, they'd record EVPs, which is electronic voice phenomena. It's basically you have a digital recorder, you talk into it, you ask nothing questions, and you see if nothing replies by analyzing the recordings later.
Do they have the EMF thing at that point?
They had the EMF at first, not the other ones.
Yeah, because I remember they started introducing new things like, we have this new thing that was built. And some of it you're like, what are they talking about?
And then EMF is an electromagnetic detection device, which basically tells you if there's a strong electromagnetic field. And they would have that. And then usually they would have, what else would they do? They do the EMF, they do the electronic voice, and they would record stuff. Yeah. And then after they did the investigation, which usually took up the majority of the episode, them walking around, something would fall or, whatever. And then later they would review the evidence for a few days, and then they would present the findings first to Jason and Grant, like Brian would. And
why
Steve.
they're in charge? They should know what the findings are.
Well, remember they always showed them on the show where they were talking, and then they would go to the person and sit down and then show them the evidence that they got and give the person advice on how to.
And the first season pretty much was nothing was ever haunted. It was always, I remember one was like, you were saying you're getting lightheaded or this. We took our EMF reader and we went, you have like some really badly exposed wires.
Because what they would say is that a heavy EMF field cause you to hallucinate and feel sick and dizzy and stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if that's necessary. Do we know that's true or is that just something they said? Because they said a lot of stuff on that show where you go, are we sure are you positive about that? But the show was hella popular.
It was.
I mean, this thing ran for 11 seasons on Sci-Fi.
And can I point out, I just point out, first season, it just seemed like nothing was ever haunted.
Yeah.
So you're always like, okay, well, and then when something happened, finally, you were like, oh, and it was something very small. Mm-hmm. So you're like, okay, I'll keep an open mind.
Maybe you sit up a little straighter because nothing ever happened.
Nothing ever happened. So the one time it happened, and then you had a bunch more episodes where nothing happened.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, okay. And you're like, well, I guess if you were ghost hunting, that probably would be your results. You would get a whole lot of nothing. Maybe once in every 2 years you get some little thing where you're like, oh. Okay.
That's the realistic side of it.
And that was one thing that when I first started watching it, that's why I watched it. Because nothing, they always had answers for everything. They were always trying to be, because you could tell they didn't want people to think they were hokey.
Yes.
They want people to take this seriously. But as it progressed and the frenzy took place.
Because it became a phenomenon.
Yeah, it seemed like, and then we were talking about, it seemed like, everything was haunted.
Suddenly the results everything had a result.
Yeah.
Every single investigation had a result past a certain point.
I mean, I don't know if it's because they went to places that have been, we're not going to, Bob Jones down the road's house, who's saying it's haunted. We're actually going to these places that have this long history.
Yeah.
But then again, also, if you go to a place with a long history, you kind of expect and want to expect something.
Yes.
So you're looking for something. I don't know. I mean, I know I sound pretty.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
skeptic.
I think perhaps, like I said, the show went on for 11 seasons on Sci-Fi. And it spun off to a different shows.
There was so much Ghost Hunters on. I think that's what burned people out. There was just so much of it.
Well, there was Ghost Hunters International,
yeah.
which is where you got a lot of the original people who I guess didn't want to work with Jason and Grant anymore. And they got together and went off in Europe and started with some new people. And then they did Ghost Hunters Academy, which was like where you're training ghost hunters. And I guess it's sort of like Survivor. If you're the one at the end, you get to join the show.
Do you get like a certification? Or?
Yeah, a little laminated card. I am now a ghost hunter.
I'm a
and
tap.
And it has your little picture on it. Now, Grant, though, he didn't stay for those full 11 seasons.
No.
He left in 2000 and, what was it? 2012, I think.
Okay.
But he came back eventually.
I had stopped watching at that point. I'm just going to be honest.
Well, Grant now hosts Ghost Hunt. He's the star of Ghost Hunt.
And you pointed, and I remember this, they also had their podcast.
They had Beyond Reality, which was a podcast that they did. Mostly you had to listen to it online because it was in unless you were in the Northeast around where they were.
Yeah.
But you could get it and call into it and talk to them, and they would talk about ghostly stuff and talk about other shows that they deemed, not realistic. And we'll get into that here in a second. But I want to just say that the show is back now with Grant, but it's not on Sci-Fi. It's on A&E. But Jason isn't on Ghost Hunters. The Ghost Hunters that's on A&E now is Grant and a whole bunch of new people. But if you want to see Jason and Steve and Dave Tango, who were all a part of the original Ghost Hunters, you got to go over to the Travel Channel and watch a show called Ghost Nation, which just started. Ghost Hunters is about to go into its 13th season because even though they've moved, it's the same show, so they still count it all as one continuous thing. So it's kind of interesting that Jason and Grant don't work together anymore. I don't know why. I imagine maybe it was one of those things where it's like, well, I'll do my show and you do your show and we'll pool our money, because they made a lot of money off Ghost Hunters.
Maybe just tired of being around each other all the time.
Maybe so.
I need a break. We're attached at the hip.
Well, they've been in this thing since 1995 together, and on TV since 2000. That's a long time, 2003. Now let's go into some of the specific episodes. You were talking about how they used to catch little things and then debate it.
Yep. And
even when they caught something on camera, they would say, well, maybe this isn't real, and I think the personification of that for me is when they did, I think it's maybe the third episode of the first season. They went to this lighthouse. It's just on a rock. It's just out in the middle of the ocean on a rock. It's called the Race Rock Lighthouse. And they did an investigation there, and there was a famous scene. You sat through the whole episode, and basically nothing happened. And then at the end, they had a camera set up in the attic, and I think Grant was sitting in a folding chair. And he gets up and walks out. And when they were reviewing this camera footage, you saw after he walked out, the chair he was sitting on moves. And so they caught a chair moving. And I remember, because this is when they were still in the trailer. They hadn't moved to the storefront yet. And at the end of the episode, the docudrama part, they're all standing outside the trailer debating. And they're trying to get Jason to admit, well, if a chair moves and no one's there, isn't that supernatural? And Jason just keeps going, no, not necessarily. Which to me is a more realistic way of portraying it.
Yeah.
Because the problem with that sort of thing is, on a show,
you need someone there that's...
Yeah, you need someone there who's going to be skeptical. And Jason at first seemed quite skeptical about things. And then later he just became kind of a hard ass, kind of a tough guy. But I don't know. That episode always jumps into mind when we talk about how the show started out as perhaps a little more realistic in so much as nothing ever happened. This was pre every investigation turned up evidence.
Yeah.
A chair moving was a big deal.
Yeah.
At this particular point. So there was that episode, and that was first season. Like I said, that was like the third episode in.
Yeah.
Do you remember that one?
I do remember that one.
Because I think me and you used to discuss this.
Yes, we did. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wasn't that also the episode where they felt like something was moving up and they kept following it? And it kept, or was that a different
That was a different one. That was the St. Augustine.
It's all, that's right.
We're getting to that.
They're all starting to blend. It's been a while since I've seen them all.
Yeah, this lighthouse was just a big, house on a rock.
Basically.
Okay. Another one they did was the Stanley Hotel.
Yeah. Which
was a big popular episode. So it was so popular, the first one they did another one that was live. So they actually went to the Stanley twice. In the second season, they went there. Now, for those of you who don't know, and if you're a horror fan, you probably do, the Stanley Hotel is where Stephen King and his wife stayed. And it inspired Stephen King to write The Shining.
And refresh my memory, why is it considered haunted?
Well, let me tell you the Stephen King story. This is what supposedly happened to Stephen King. Now, this is something that's told by the hotel staff regularly because Stephen King is famous. And so we don't know if this has been exaggerated, for publicity purposes or whatnot. But the
people in the rooms.
The story is that Stephen King and his wife went to the Stanley Hotel. They were looking for a place to stay. The Stanley was about to close down for the winter season. And they were the only ones that were really going to be staying in the hotel. They had to actually pay with cash because they had already taken out the credit card machine. So Stephen King and his wife went up to their room, put their bags down, and went and had dinner. And the story is when they went back to their rooms, their luggage was empty and all their clothes were in the drawers. And they're like, well, who unpacked our bags? This sounds to me a little hokey. Because my idea, if I came back into the room and saw that, would be like, what's stolen?
I know. Who busted up in my room and went through my things?
That's right. My mind is not going to go to, a ghost did that. A ghost put our clothes away.
Casper was so helpful.
Isn't that sweet?
Put our clothes away.
And so where's
my camera? Oh, it's gone.
That's part of it. Where's my wallet, honey? Casper must have taken that too. And then, Stephen King would walk around the abandoned hotel, and he saw things there, like the little.
He saw a little boy on a 3-wheel going.
No, he didn't see any ghosts. He just saw things like the little hose you put out fires with, and thought, what if that came alive and jumped at me? And that became a scene in the book, and in the horrible miniseries. But I'm not even going to go into that. But anyway, so that inspired him to write The Shining. He said he went to bed that night in the Stanley, and when he woke up, he had the story for The Shining kind of in his head. So we got a good book out of the whole ordeal. And the Stanley Hotel got a lot of publicity out of it because they've been throwing out this Stephen King story for, I don't know how many years, 30, 40 years. But then the Taps guy showed up. And like I said, this was second season. I remember some Brian drama was in this because I think Brian had left the group and come back at this point. And, I remember a scene where they're in the auditorium of the Stanley Hotel and Jason's sitting there and having a real heart-to-heart with him. Like, you really got to pull yourself together, man. If you want to be a real ghost hunter. And Brian's sitting there like, okay. Yeah. But poor Brian, he got his ass kicked on this show. I feel for you, Brian. So anyway, there was that one. And I remember when they did the live one, they went down in the basement.
Yeah.
And they heard a woman calling from across the basement, and they were communicating with her. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And they were like, hey, she's answering us. And I'm sure that was not, anybody standing over there.
It was a crew person eating a Subway sandwich.
That's right. I was like, hey, I'm going to fuck with them. Watch this. Watch this, Joe. They're going to think this is a ghost. And they got their EMF meter out. Now, another one that I remember is the Manson family one.
Yeah, and it wasn't even the house.
Because the house had already been torn down.
And it wasn't even like built on the property. It was like
down the street
or something.
And come to find out, the guy that called them who owned the house was like trying to get a book deal or a movie deal going.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that had nothing to do with him bringing in the Sci-Fi Channel to do an investigation. But he was really into this whole. I guess he was trying to say that Sharon Tate and those who had been murdered, I guess when the house got torn down, moved into his house.
I guess they just trick or treat around the block.
Yeah, they're like, well, I mean, where to go? I don't know why you wouldn't just stick around the mansion that's been built there now. I mean, it's a huge mansion that's on the Cielo Drive property where the Tate house used to be. That was the first episode where they introduced the K2 meter.
Oh, yeah.
As a piece of equipment. Because someone came along with them, like one of their friends, a special guest star, and he had this K2 meter, and he was like, guys, look what this will do. And he holds it up, and the K2 meter has these little LED lights that are sort of like a semi-crescent, and they move across. And so when you would say, ask a yes or no question and say, okay, move the lights once for yes and twice for no. And so they would ask a question, and sure enough, on this K2 meter, the lights would go bloop and for yes and bloop, bloop for no, not that sound effect. And so this was introduced, and that became a big part of the show. Now, the problem with that, I remember even when I watched the episode, the problem was when you see them ask the question, it's on a wide shot. And my filmmaker brain is watching this, and it's seeing when the answer arrives, they're cutting to a close-up.
Yeah.
So instantly my mind goes, how do I know that's a simultaneous shot?
Yeah.
How do I know that hasn't just been cut to?
Yeah.
How do we know that answer came from that question?
Because it's hard to get a cutaway shot with just one camera.
Yes, you have to have two cameras and one poised over the guy's shoulder that's not in view of the other camera.
Which is
tough.
Yeah, because you never saw another camera.
No, you never saw another camera on it. The only time you saw another camera is that episode where the cameraman got pushed down. Remember that?
Yeah. He
got knocked down. But other than that, the cameras were invisible. I'm talking about the Sci-Fi Channel cameras, the cameras that are filming the show.
Yeah.
I remember so that was sketchy. It was sketchy because of the homeowner, and it was sketchy because of the editing tricks with the K2 meter. I'm a skeptical person by nature. Okay, I'm just going to throw this out there right now. I'm not the biggest believer in ghosts myself. I have never. Well, we'll talk about our own personal experiences near the end of this show, but I don't think I've ever seen a ghost. I'm not saying they don't exist because I've never seen one, but I'm just saying that you have to really give me something good, and editing tricks just ain't going to cut it.
No.
I remember they got an EVP from I can't even call it the Sharon Tate house because it's not. It's a house down the block. But the house that's near the Sharon Tate house. But
I remember them saying, oh, the Manson, the killing house, they advertised it, and then you watch it, wait, what?
That's not the house.
But even then I thought, well, didn't they tear it down? I was thinking, well, maybe it's where the new one's built.
No, not
and
even
then
that.
It was just like, nope. It's down at the Taco Bell down the road.
Yeah, we're just near it. Maybe she's just exploring.
Yeah.
Because they got that EVP from that episode of a woman screaming. You remember that?
Yeah.
And you just kind of go, now, if this is phony, that's in really bad taste.
Yeah.
Because these people actually did get murdered. And I'm pretty sure that's phony because why would Sharon Tate be hanging out in the streets?
And it's also not like because sometimes I'd go to like places where people have been dead for hundreds of years. Like, oh, we're in Old Wild West town.
Yeah, because they went
to
Tombstone.
There are no relatives around that are still around to watch this.
Yeah, so you don't know if that voice is the voice of the person.
Yeah, but then we have this voice like, oh, could this be so-and-so? And I'm like, their family's still alive.
Yeah, and that's the thing, too. Like, if you went to Tombstone and you caught a voice, they were really quick to say stuff like, well, that's Wyatt Earp.
Yeah.
Like, how do you know that's Wyatt Earp? How the fuck do you know what Wyatt Earp sounded like? I mean, from the movie, but that's just an actor.
That's right.
But,
I mean, the thing with Sharon Tate, though, is like her sister, and I think her mother was still alive at the time, right? Or she had just passed.
Yeah, no, her mother was still alive.
I'm just thinking, what do they think when they see this?
Oh, when they're flipping through and they see ghost hunters?
Yeah, ghost hunters. It's Sharon Tate talking.
Listen to her screaming. And it's clearly,
And it's 2 blocks down the road.
Yeah, and it's not even, right. It's very.
I wonder what they, how do you. It's got to be so strange. That's your life, and then you turn it on. And
that's very weird.
It has to be so weird.
Yeah, and especially when it's someone you loved, like that. I remember that same episode. Remember they went to the Charlie Chaplin. Well, it's the Jim Henson studio.
Yeah.
But it was built by Charlie Chaplin.
Yeah.
And I think they caught some evidence there of like a really tall person or something.
It was a Muppet.
It was Miss Piggy. we caught the EVP of Miss Piggy. But those two, that was like their Hollywood episode. We're venturing out of Rhode Island. We're going to Hollywood to Jim Henson studio, and not really the Sharon Tate house, but we'll call it that. Now, the one you were talking about was the St. Augustine Lighthouse. That's the one where they were filming up the spiral stairs that go up to the top of the lighthouse, and you saw, and this was pretty impressive.
Yeah.
This looked pretty good.
Yeah.
You saw what looked like somebody peek over about halfway, and then it went like in a matter of seconds. It seemed to shoot up the stairs, and then you saw somebody else peek over, or maybe the same thing, peek over from the very top. I remember when I saw that, I thought that the video footage of that looked pretty good.
Yeah.
It didn't look,
I thought that was a cool episode when I saw it.
Yeah.
I was like, ooh, this one is not ridiculous.
Yeah.
This is entertaining.
I think they caught some sounds, too,
Yeah.
in there when they were walking up, like footsteps coming up behind them. The St. Augustine Lighthouse is in Florida, by the way, if any of you want to go down there and visit it and see if you capture something like that. But that was a piece of footage that I remember thinking, oh, that's pretty good. Like, I can kind of buy that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm not saying it's real. I'm just saying it looked good. Like, it looked like something you might capture. Yeah. There was another one.
And it was an interesting episode.
Remember when they went to the Eastern State Penitentiary and they caught that thing materializing and then running away?
Yeah.
That was not a bad piece of footage.
Yeah.
That looked pretty good.
Yeah.
It didn't look like a guy because it seemed to be moving in kind of fast motion. Now, when you work with the Sci-Fi Channel and you have many, many editing tools at your disposal, it's not impossible that you could fake any one of these two.
I mean, they were working on Tin Man at the time.
And, it was one of those things where, and so I think, so I'm saying it looked good.
Yes.
But it's not beyond the realm of being fakery.
Yes.
And so I just want to throw that out there. Well, another one that was sort of like the Eastern State that was really popular, you and I remember talked about this a lot, was the Waverly Hills Sanatorium.
I liked that episode. That was an interesting episode.
And that's in Kentucky.
Yeah.
And it used to be a TB hospital, tuberculosis. They used to call it the White Plague. It was a huge epidemic at a certain point. Many, many thousands of people died of tuberculosis. And places like Waverly Hill were set up to treat those people. And they would have, like, on the roof, places where you could sit out, because tuberculosis is a disease of the lungs, so you wouldn't be able to breathe and you would basically suffocate. They used to do all kinds of horrible, torturous treatments to tuberculosis patients, such as putting balloons down your lungs and inflating them with balloons, which just sounds horrible. And that probably didn't help the people too much. No. That's how they wound up in the death chute. Because underneath Waverly Hill, there was a place they used to silently dispose of bodies, so the other patients...
built into the walls.
Yes. The other patients wouldn't be able to see them carting out all the many people who died of tuberculosis. So it wound up being called the death chute. And it was this long thing where it was sort of like a slide and stairs going down beside it, and you would put the bodies down the slide, and then you would load them into a hearse. Yeah, go for a ride. And you'd load them into a hearse and take them off to the morgue or whatever. So just the idea of a death chute being this dark place with a slide and stone stairs, that sounds scary.
Yeah.
Right? So I remember that. I remember that they caught, like, shadow people up in the...
Wasn't like a half body?
Yes, in the hallway. They had because this is one of the things they used was a thermal camera. Remember? It would read heat. And so sometimes you would catch these little heat signatures of things, or cold, I guess, signatures sometimes, of things that would run across the camera. And that was at Waverly Hills. They were in a hallway.
Maybe it was Arnie, and he'd covered part of his body in mud like he did in Predator.
Oh, that's a good point, yeah. And you saw him running, because sort of like Predator. It looked like what Predator uses, the thermal imaging. And you saw this little bitty short thing run from one door to another across the hall.
It was only like half a torso or something.
Right. Allegedly.
Allegedly.
We're going to use our friend Ryan's word.
Allegedly.
It could have just been a little person, or it could have been a child running across there. It could have been Matt Roloff, for all I know.
He had a show at the time.
That's
crossover.
Right. Crossover time. They should have had Matt Roloff on Ghost Hunters as a guest. Like, I so would have watched that.
And he catches the ghost with his trebuchet.
The trebuchet that nearly took his son out.
That's right.
If none of you have seen Little People, Big World, this makes no sense.
He captures them in the pumpkins.
Because that was a big show at the time, too.
It
People loved
big.
them some Little People, Big World.
That's right. My mom watched it every week, along with Ghost Hunters.
Yeah, so these two can kind of tie together in some way that makes no sense. But yes, it
Two
does
different
sort of.
networks. So.
It was true, yeah, because the one was on Sci-Fi
TLC.
and the other one was on TLC.
Yeah.
Now, another episode talking about famously haunted places, probably one of the more famous places they went was the Queen Mary, which is docked in Long Island, famous ship. And, so many ghost stories. I remember the old Unsolved Mysteries episode, which I watched not too long ago, where they had and when you watch the Unsolved Mysteries as a kid and you saw that, you're like, oh my God, these effects are so terrifying. And then you watch it now and it's like, wow, these effects are not good at all. Like the little wet footprints that appear next to the swimming pool.
But Robert Stack made that show.
I mean, you can't not love it because of Robert Stack. And I'll be honest with you, after you watch a few episodes of Unsolved Mysteries, even to this day, if you don't go around and start checking the locks in your house, there's something wrong with you. Because that show will get under your skin. Because everybody on that show was either abducted by aliens, murdered by a satanic cult, or kidnapped. So you're like, Jesus, the world is full of horrible people.
That's how you learn not to trust anyone.
It was good
through Unsolved Mysteries.
It was good as kids to watch this show because it taught you how many horrible people.
That's right. Don't go to that weird guy with the candy.
And if you die, there's not necessarily a solution coming. No one might know what happened to you.
No.
Robert Stack.
Those were so depressing when they always had the updates. Like, update. You're like, oh, there's an update.
Right. Maybe they saved someone's life. We found that poor girl's murderer. We found the devil cult that killed all these people. Because this was right on the end of Satanic Panic, too, in the 80s. Everything was a devil cult. But I was talking about the Queen Mary. There's a famous scene in the Ghost Hunters episode involving that ship, where they apparently caught something that it was a bed. They set up a camera in a little space and in a small room, because, you can stay on the Queen Mary. It's kind of like a hotel. And they caught the sheets of the bed being pulled back. And when they reviewed the evidence, they caught that it was a fakery, that somebody had basically stopped the camera, climbed behind the bed, pulled it back a little bit, started again, and then pulled it back a second time. So it was an in-camera editing trick.
What if it was a crew of sci-fi?
Well, that's what we're going to kind of get into here shortly. If that's fake, because I remember when they did the reveal to the Queen Mary people, Jason was really kind of condescending to it. He was like, well, the idea was, we know that you faked this on our show. Yeah.
It was one of your crew.
That's right.
It was Queen Mary trying to pull a fast one.
And they caught that it was fake. I get that. But if you do that, and you're very condescending to the people that you say faked it on your show, you better not ever be caught faking shit on your own show.
Yeah.
Because, you're kind of hypocritical.
And then also you start to think, was it the Queen Mary that faked it?
Right. Well, that's when we're starting to get into other things that makes you wonder, was it Queen Mary or were they just taking the fall?
Yeah.
Because now we're going to talk about...
It's like House of Cards, but with ghosts.
Now we're going to talk about the 7-hour long, I'll repeat, the 7
Well, the
hour,
first one was how long? It
3
was
hours.
3 hours, yes.
Then it was so popular that
I watched that one.
That Sci-Fi managed, every Halloween they would do a live show, is what we're talking about. And at first it was 3 hours, and then eventually this show was so popular that Sci-Fi was like, we're just going to give you 7 hours. We're going to sit back and not worry about any programming, and you guys take it. So in 2008, they did a 7-hour live Halloween show.
Made no sense.
And they were incredibly boring.
They were very boring.
And they would always have
a wrestler or some
well, this particular show had WWE's The Miz. When I think science, I think The Miz. And so they had The Miz on there, and he was doing helping them ghost hunt. And this 2008 live broadcast that was incredibly long, almost half a day.
I didn't even watch it. I mean,
7 hours is just...
I remember flipping it over there going, oh, God.
I mean, what is that, 5 hours shy of half a day?
And the year before, I watched the 3 hour.
Yeah, well, yeah. But anyway, so on this 2008 Halloween special featuring The Miz, they caught a couple of things that were really sketchy in terms of the ghost hunters themselves. One of the main ones that is always pointed to, you can look up the footage yourself. If we were able to on YouTube now, I would show it to you myself, but YouTube doesn't like us showing anything. So I'm going to tell you about it. Okay, listen, I'm going to tell you about this. Grant and Jason are in a room. It's night vision, because that's how it looks the creepiest. Jason's walking, and they get a sense of a presence. And at one point, Jason's wearing a jacket, and he's got the collar flipped up. And you see a shot of him crossing in front of the camera. You see his back, and you see his collar go down, and he jerks back. And he says, "Whoa, something just grabbed my collar and pulled me back." And you actually see the collar move downward as if a hand grabbed it and pulled it. And keep in mind, Grant has his hand in his pocket when this happens. And so they talk about
fetch?
It. Exactly. And well, wait, I'm about to give you the what the fetch moment. Get ready. And so they're talking about him getting pulled, and Jason's there. And then Jason, and as they're about to walk away, Jason goes, "All right, buddy, you're all right," and pats his shoulder. And when he pats Grant's shoulder, the collar goes boop down again, which suggests that patting his back somehow activated whatever made the collar move up and down. So that was pretty much a dead giveaway that the collar was rigged. Grant had his hand in his pocket. Clearly, he pulled a string or something, and this collar went down. And Jason,
a remote control collar.
Jason, in trying to be friendly, patting his friend on the shoulder, accidentally activated the same mechanism, and so the collar moved again when he wasn't being pulled. So that's a pretty clear evidence of fakery.
Tom fakery.
So what's your reaction to that? What the
fetch?
What the fetch?
What the fetch?
And there was another incident that happened on that 7-hour show where you had them talking, and somebody said
this 7-hour show is where the empire started to crumble a little.
Yeah, I think it is, because this is always pointed to by skeptics of this show. There was another time when someone else, maybe The Miz, was in a corridor, and you heard a voice say, "You're not supposed to be here." And when you hear that, the voice sounds like it's being played over a speaker. You can kind of tell a difference between a speaker voice and a voice that's happening in the room. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So those were two incidents of pretty clear fakery on one show. Again, it's a 7-hour show. The other ones that were live that were 3 hours were kind of boring because nothing ever happened. Maybe they thought, well, we're really popular now. We need to give the audience something. And so they came up with these two elements of fakery.
Which is, why would you want to do a 7-hour show when in the original, like the first couple of series, they're there all night, and they condense them watching all this evidence, and then, they condense it down and present it, and nothing happened.
Yeah, and it's boring.
So why would you do that instead of make us watch it all in real time?
Because it's all, that's why I say this must...
And they can't review the evidence at that point.
No.
To give us an answer.
No, you have to take a couple days to do that.
Yeah.
So, I think the idea was this was this big event at the peak of our
house.
At the peak of our popularity, and so let's just see how far we can stretch this. They stretched it a little too far and got caught in some funny business.
Did they ever fess up to it, or did they just kind of brush it under the thing? Or?
Grant, in a 2003 interview, said in their contracts they're not allowed to fake anything. But the collar, you can't deny that collar.
Yeah.
There's no way that collar would have moved in the exact same way when his pal patted his back.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to look that one up.
Yeah, I'll show you. But you guys too, look up that clip. You'll see it for yourself. Now we're going to start talking about some of the criticism. I've criticized a little bit, but we're going to talk about some of the other criticisms that the show faced. One of the key ones was Donna LaCroix, at least for me. She was an original cast member, and she did an interview where she couldn't talk about specifics because of an NDA, but she suggested that the show had a staging crew. Past a certain point, the show utilized the staging crew. Now, what a staging crew is it's a group of people that come into the location prior to the investigation and set up things that will happen so that you can capture it. Now, Jason and Grant are smart fellas, obviously. They've marketed this thing and made a lot of money off of it. They wouldn't be faked out by a staging crew, not over and over and over again. So in my mind, if there's a staging crew, then the key players have to be involved.
Mm-hmm.
You would figure out that this shit is being staged.
Yeah.
So that's one thing Donna suggested. She also pointed out that Grant and Jason own a piece of the show. So merchandising, tours, all the things that have come about after the fact, they get a piece of all of that because they own Ghost Hunters.
And there were different TAPS things popping up across the country.
Yes, they were franchising.
Yeah.
Donna and the other cast members, everyone but Jason and Grant, were not part of that co-ownership deal. So they were getting paid basically for an appearance per episode. Mm-hmm. Now, what really made me feel bad for Donna was she said that, there was one thing that she couldn't go into that happened on one specific episode that she completely disagreed with and would not participate in. And after that, things started to go south for her. She said on that interview that she had lost pretty much everything and she had to move back in with her parents. Now, if, that's pretty rough, because she was in this for the right reasons, I think. She was trying to, look and see if there are ghosts and stuff. But it sounds kind of like she got screwed.
Yeah.
While they made a lot of money as the peak of this thing was rising. There is a group called the Skeptical Analysis of the Paranormal Society. SAPS! Which is great. SAPS. They were founded in order to recreate and debunk some of the alleged evidence on the show. And some of the things that they pointed out
Did they have their own show?
No. I wish they did.
They should have had like Ghost Hunter at 7.
Debunked.
Followed by SAPS at 8.
Well, it could have been Ghost Hunter debunked.
Yeah.
When it hits like a stamp. One of the things that they pointed out in these ghost investigations that were done incorrectly by TAPS is they considered the feelings of people as ghostly evidence.
Yeah.
If you're sitting in a room, you have a feeling, they're considering this as evidence. Now, Jason and Grant would say no.
Yeah.
Especially Jason would be like, no, we don't consider feelings. We're very scientific. But that goes into the second things that SAPS pointed out. I just like saying it. Using unproven tools, sampling errors, and ineffective recording devices. Focusing on the history of the location as opposed to the actual phenomenon that you catch. Now, my analogy for this would be as follows. Let's say that you work late at night and you have to go through a dark alley in order to get to your car after work. You have heard that someone was murdered in this alley.
You're going to be creeped out.
When you go into that alley, instantly you're going to be. That doesn't necessarily mean anything. It just means something bad happened there. So instantly you're anxious.
And you're expecting something.
Oh, you're expecting something. And everything that happens becomes a ghost. That's how I think about a lot of these haunted locations. Things like the Queen Mary. You go in there expecting to see something and you see something.
Like, oh, it's Fred Astaire.
That's right. It's almost related to the ideomotor response, which is where, your body expects something to happen, so it makes it happen. Like dowsing, you're holding the forked stick. Yeah. You go somewhere and you don't know that you're consciously doing it, but the forked stick moves down. It's the ideomotor response. It doesn't mean you're an idiot. It just means that you're expecting something to happen, so your body is making it happen. Now, some of the equipment that they use, we kind of went into earlier. The infrared thermometers they use, which is where you have the laser, you point at something. They would use that sometimes to read cold spots happening in the middle of the room.
I use it to torment the cats.
Well, infrared thermometer, it reads surface tissue or surface temperature. It doesn't read just whatever's in there. I couldn't point it into the middle of this room and it would tell me the temperature in the middle of the room.
Yeah.
If I pointed it at this table, it would tell me the temperature of the table. So what I'm saying is you're not using it properly.
You can't have a cold spot.
That's
in the middle of the room.
You could use another thermometer to see if that little area is cold, but you couldn't use an infrared thermometer.
I'll use my meat thermometer.
There you go. Like the EMF detector. Here's the problem with that. It detects electromagnetic fields. Mm-hmm. Before you can say it detects ghosts, you have to prove that ghosts have something to do with electromagnetic fields. Like, if you just assume that a ghost is created by electromagnetic energy and you get a reading on an EMF and you say that's a ghost, that's not.
Where did that even come from?
I don't know. That's just something. I have no idea. They probably watched Ghostbusters or something and figured it out. Because this is the problem with this, is that you can't prove that.
Yeah.
You can't prove that ghosts create a disturbance in electromagnetic field. You can assume it. You can use equipment incorrectly to get readings, but the reading is useless because you're not using the tool in the proper manner. They use Geiger counters on the show.
I remember that. Yeah.
A Geiger counter reads ionized radiation. So again, you have to prove first, if you're going to be totally scientific and use the scientific method, number one, you have to prove that ghosts affect ionized radiation. And so therefore, when you read ionized radiation on the Geiger counter, it's a ghost.
Yeah.
You have to what I'm saying is you're skipping the first step.
Yeah.
You know, it's like the K2 meter with the Sharon Tate thing, you know. When you the editing is really sketchy, but again, a K2 meter is an EMF meter. It's just a different way to register it, you know. So you would have to prove that it has to do with electromagnetic energy. And EVPs, as cool as they can be with digital technology, are extremely easy to fake. Like me and you could sit down and make an EVP recording that sounded pretty good using a simple computer, using your iPad. We could do that. You know, it's not that big. So a guy named Benjamin Radford, he said, and he was one of the critics, sort of the skeptics that looked at ghost hunters and other ghost hunting type shows. You know, he used to say, I'll read you this quote from him. He said, "You may own the world's most sophisticated thermometer, but if you're using it as a barometer, your measurements are worthless. Just as using a calculator doesn't make you a mathematician, using a scientific instrument doesn't make you a scientist." And I think a lot can be said for Benjamin's quote. And so, you know, on that note, we can talk a little bit here in our last little bit of the show about some of our own personal experiences. You and I were both a fan of ghost hunters.
We were.
I think there's an essence to a person when you want to believe in ghosts. You want to think that something goes on past life.
Yes.
You know, you don't want to think, you know, as I've been criticized for saying this by people, that everything just shuts down like turning off a computer.
Yeah.
Which is my personal opinion. I struggled with this for a long time. I wanted to believe that something existed after, you know, and I wish I could believe that.
And there's also the theory that we're just energy.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we pass, our energy just...
Well, let's talk about some of our personal experiences.
Kind of like powder. Is that a good...
Yeah, oh. Yeah,
Did I just compare? Okay. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
You and I went to this place called Huntington College.
Yes.
We both attended college together. Huntington College is famous for a ghost called the Red Lady, who supposedly was a person named Martha. She was a student who was from, Huntington College is in Alabama. This was a student who was from the North. She was out of her element. She didn't know anybody in Alabama, didn't know anybody at the school, but she was made to go there because I think it was her grandfather's alma mater or something like that. And she did not fit in with anybody. She always wore red dresses. Everything in her room was red. Her comforter was red. She had a series of roommates. They thought she was weird. They kept moving out. So she started to rebel against the mean girls and would run down the halls of the dormitories at night and slam their doors or go stand in their room when they're all talking and leer at them and then walk out silently, just kind of creep people out. Well, one of her roommates eventually moved out, and it was the last straw. And so Martha allegedly, back to Ryan's allegedly slit her own wrists and killed herself and was found in a pool of red blood in her red comforter, in her red room, wearing her red dress. And so the story is that on that top floor of what used to be a dormitory is now a classroom building, she still haunts, the Red Lady, Martha, still haunts the top floor of that former dormitory. Now, if you go to that school, you hear all about the Red Lady. And a friend of ours, a mutual friend, was doing a paper about Martha and the Red Lady, and she asked me to go with her up to the top floor of this dormitory. And she had a little, like, recorder, and she had some music on. This was back when they had tapes and a little mini tape recorder. And she had some music on it from the 1920s, which is when Martha supposedly lived.
She even thought she had found, like, maybe possibly a picture of her.
Yeah, she thought she'd kind of, she was a sleuth. Our friend was a sleuth. She was figuring this red lady shit out. And so we went up there, and I'll tell you what happened. We went up there. It was all dark. It was just a single hallway with doors all around it. Huntington is heated. A lot of the old buildings are heated by steam radiators. So you have the steam radiators hissing. And the only light we had was an exit light that was just making everything appropriately red, because we didn't turn on the lights up there because you're not supposed to go up there. We were sneaking. And she started to play the 1920s music on this little mini tape recorder. And as we were standing there, the music started to slow down. And I heard it. It would get slower and slower and slower, as if the batteries were being drained. And then eventually it would just stop. And then she stopped the thing and she played it again, and it would play perfectly fine for a few seconds. And then it would start to slow down, slow down, slow down, like the battery's being drained, and then it would stop. And yes, that happened. I was there. Then we left the building, and when we were outside, she played it again, and it played fine. She said that it was new batteries. So can I explain that? No. Do I attribute that to Martha, the red lady? I can't, because I don't know. All I know is that the battery, for some reason, was being drained. I can't explain it. But I'm a skeptic. I don't believe in ghosts, and that didn't make me believe in ghosts. You know what I mean? Why weren't you there that night?
I think that's before we really started hanging out a lot.
Really?
I think so. I think it was at the very beginning of freshman year.
Because you were into ghosts and stuff. You would have loved it.
But still, I wouldn't have. Yeah, I still wasn't really in the department yet. Remember? Because I hadn't really. I took a class or so. So I really wasn't, like, around everyone yet.
Well, it's a shame you couldn't have been up there, because right now it's just me and our friend's word. But listen, I'm a skeptic. I don't necessarily believe in ghosts, and I can tell you that story because that actually did happen. There was another thing that happened when I first went to LA. I had a friend who lived in an area of LA which is a very large. It's one of the largest. It might be the largest gated communities, called Park La Brea, near the La Brea tar pits, if you're familiar with LA. And it used to be a military base, which is why it's walled and gated. And back in the old days, there was apparently an influenza outbreak that killed a lot of people. And now it's just apartments, very tall apartments. Some famous people live there. I mean, I lived there for a short time, and I'm famous. No, I'm just kidding. But it's supposedly haunted by the ghosts of these people who died.
I remember hearing about that, yeah.
And our friend who we stayed with, at first it was me out there because I went to visit him for Thanksgiving. And I stayed with him, and he said, this apartment is haunted. There's a ghost in here. There's a ghost. And I was laying down on the floor of his bedroom because he was going to sleep in the bed, and he made like an air mattress on the floor, and I was sleeping on the floor, and him and his friends were downstairs because here's this thing: when I get off a plane, I'm jet lagged. Don't mess with me if I take a long trip. I need to lay down, sleep, and when I wake up, I'll be fine. So I was in my lay down, let's sleep mode, and I was the only one upstairs. And as I was laying there, the door to the bedroom slammed shut. I was half asleep when this happened. Can I tell you that someone in that house wasn't fucking with me, trying to push this whole ghost thing? I absolutely cannot tell you that. I think there is a distinct possibility someone might have slammed that door playing a trick on me. Because a few minutes later, they came upstairs and they said, hey, you want to go eat at Roscoe's Chicken and Waffles? I said, hell yeah. So before they'd done that, they could have slammed that door.
Yeah.
But you and I stayed there together when we moved out there.
Yep.
And we had would you want to talk about when we were upstairs?
Well, I remember
the first thing,
that was when we were upstairs. Everyone was going out. They left. And we heard someone running up the stairs and down the hallway.
Yes.
And you looked out and no one was there.
Well, what happened, I was half asleep and the bed shook.
Yeah. And
I looked over at you and you were awake watching TV, right?
Of course.
And you said, and you and you heard it, right?
Yeah.
And so then I got up and I went and I looked out at the hallway, and I saw nobody there. And then I looked around the corner because the way the hallway was like an L, and it went into a bathroom and stopped. So I went around the corner. I looked into the bathroom. There was nobody there. So I didn't see anybody. The one thing I didn't do is go into the rooms.
Yeah, no.
I didn't go in anybody's bedroom.
Well, because at first we were thinking someone has broken in.
Yes, that's
the first thing we thought. And somehow they came home like shortly after, even though they were supposed to go out. And they're like, no one's here. And they checked.
Yeah.
But there's still, I mean, we were like, let's stay in this room and pretend we're asleep. If it's a killer, you know. Yeah.
Did we barricade that door?
I think we did.
I think we did too. Because, and here's the thing though. I'm not so sure that's a ghost.
No.
Because after me and her got our own apartment and moved out of that joint, there was some people trying to break up into that house.
Yeah, that's what I had heard.
Our friend who lived there was in his bathtub and heard someone banging on the door, and he went and looked down the stairs, and somebody was trying to get, and the only thing that was holding them out was the chain.
And there was a story where the dishwasher was open and one of the plates had fallen
out.
Yeah.
And it had not broken, but just been taken out.
Yeah.
And sat on the floor. Now, when I found out that people were trying to break into the house, my mind went to when I was checking that hallway and that bathroom. There might have been somebody in those bedrooms I was walking past.
Yeah.
That's fucking freaky.
Yes.
So I don't know if that's a ghostly occurrence. I think that's more like some sketchy ass people breaking up into our house, and we're lucky we didn't get murdered in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Because that happens often.
Yeah.
But there was another thing in that house. Do you want to talk about the EVP?
Oh yeah, because he wanted to do recordings because he was watching Ghost Hunters
our friend.
Well at the time.
Yeah.
We were all watching Ghost Hunters, and he had a digital recording, didn't he?
Mm-hmm. He had a
recorder, and we just sat in the living room and he asked questions.
And one of the questions he asked was, could you tell Rebecca that you're not going to hurt her? And then we put this on a computer, and he played it, and on the recording there was some sort of a sound.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
I remember a sound, but I don't remember what it was.
It was just a little, like a sigh. It could have been any sort of a pop or a sigh. You know, I'm not entirely sure but
someone had gas.
Yeah, our buddy had gas. Our nameless buddy had gas, and it picked up on this in this recorder. Did that affect you at all? Did you think that was a real ghost? Because if you did, that's fine, but I was just curious.
I didn't know at the time. I just remember being freaked out staying there because the running down the stairs had already scared the crap out of me.
Yes.
And also there was something else that happened in the room the first or second night we were there.
I don't remember that.
But I honestly thought the night that the feet were running down the stairs, I just thought somebody had broken in.
And we were in there by ourselves.
Yeah, and we were there by ourselves, and we were about to get
murdered. Yeah, and that was like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
You know, that was freaky. That freaked me out.
Yeah, because we thought we were going to
get murked.
Yes.
In Los Angeles.
Yes.
So that was something that happened with us. I know,
but they kept trying to say, "Oh, this place is haunted."
So in the end, do you believe that place was haunted?
No.
I don't believe it was haunted either. I think it was haunted by the bad karma of the crazy fucking drug addicts who were trying to get in there. Because Park La Brea, even though it was a walled-off gated community, was not, was not very secure. Frankly, it all it had was those little gates.
We were in there.
I mean, listen, I didn't live there. I didn't have any sort of security, and I could just stand, and when the gates opened, I could just walk in.
Yeah.
There was nothing that kept you out. There was no like posted guards or anything. If you wanted to get in there, you could get in there.
And this has been a while ago, so I don't know if it's changed.
Yes, I'm not trying to say don't move into Park. Park La Brea management, do not get angry at me. I'm just saying that when we were there, it was very easy to access.
This was a long time ago.
This was quite a while ago. It was over 10 years.
Yeah.
When this happened. So anyway, that's our personal experience stories, and that's kind of our show on the ghost hunters and ghost hunting in general. I'm not trying to talk down anybody, and I do want to say that this was all our opinion. We're not. This is just an opinion.
I do want to know where Donna is these days.
I would like to know too. Yeah.
Maybe we should Google that.
I kind of like Donna. I liked her honesty in that interview, and I'm really sorry if she really did get screwed because she seemed like a really nice lady. So anyway, if you guys enjoy Ghost Hunters or the new show Ghost Nation, continue to enjoy it, But I don't know that it necessarily causes any harm to like that sort of thing. But I'm just saying, be skeptical in your beliefs of it. Yeah. Don't just buy everything you see because it's on television, because a lot of that stuff is an editing trick. It's like a magician friend of mine said, if you're doing a magic trick on camera, you better never cut to a close-up because it's instantly ruined because they're going to think that you pulled something. And that's pretty much right. Magic tricks have to be done in one long wide shot live. The moment you cut, it's over with. Mm-hmm. So not that I'm saying anything against David Blaine, but, that kind of thing. Or what's his face with the hairdo with the the newer guy with the oiled abs,
I don't know
always showing off his abs. Chris Angel, like Chris Angel sort of thing. But anyway, and now that we've talked badly about a number of people, magicians, for no good reason, we're going to leave you today. But I hope you enjoyed our show on ghost hunters and ghost hunting. Let us know what you think about ghosts. One of our on our chat window says they're not real. I'm assuming you mean the ghost hunters.
Satan says they're not real.
Satan, yes, his name is Satan. Satan says they're not real. So that's good. And and I want to know all of your opinions about this sort of thing. You've heard ours. So until next time, we'll be seeing you in 2020. I want you all to have a very safe New Year's and take care of yourselves.